Hello everyone and welcome back to a Hearts of Iron 4 Dev Diary / Developer Corner, it kind of varies what people call it these days, talking about international markets. The international market is a new feature planned to come to the next DLC / update for Hoi 4, which, as the name would imply, involves the trading of different equipment between nations, not necessarily in the form of a lend-lease. So without further ado, let's... oh god.
It is I, Oscar Benavides, here on an important task.
Yes?
Well, there was a dev diary last week about military industrial orgs and you didn't cover it.
Ugh, do I have to?
Yes.
I'll do it at the end, once I've covered international markets. Okay, so now without further ado, let's begin. So we start off with our traditional introductory paragraph talking about a very important wording that must be addressed. Everything you see here is super work in progress. Super work in progress mock-ups, nothing is certain, everything can change, details are yet to be finalised. With that elephant in the room being mentioned, let's see what their feature intent and goals are for an international market system. So they want a place where you can buy and sell equipment, both nations get a reward from it, and it's a new way for countries to contribute specialist equipment to other nations. So I'm thinking specifically things like transport planes, if you have paratroopers, but don't want to add another mill or two to actually get the transport planes out. The ability to source equipment from other nations as needed, particularly good in the mindset of something like multiplayer, where you want to be early on in trading equipment. Maybe you're, giving stuff to Hungary in preparation for them being an air controller or something. And finally, for majors to set the global standard for commonplace equipment leveraging their superior economic might. I'm kind of interested to see how they're going to manage this one in the system that they're displaying here, but we'll get into that once we go further down. So the baseline is this is a system now where you can buy and sell things and have access to buy things that you might have otherwise have been, let's say, less able to buy, such as special equipment like German tanks or American planes or whatever it wants to be. Moving on down to the flow, we're introduced to an image of what is going to be the new international market screen. They've actually annexed the previously kind of less used diplomacy screen, which had a list of all the countries that you could talk to, because, well, it wasn't really used very much. It can still be accessed, you just click on the international market button, and then at the very bottom you can open the diplomacy UI, where it used to be, but their intention is that this feature will be more useful than the previous feature, so this one takes precedence. Looking at the image now, it doesn't seem too complicated as it stands. I mean, there's two buttons right at the top, a big one to buy and a big one to sell, and at the bottom you can see the ongoing contracts, so that is probably going to be nations where you've agreed to buy things or sell things from them, and equally it's going to happen over a period of time for you to buy and sell them. We also have some other information, which I'm sure will be discussed. So once all is said and done, you'll have decided whether you're buying or selling equipment, and you'll come to a screen that looks like this. For the sharp-eyed among you, you might notice that at the bottom it says, before you can buy equipment, you need to request for market access from another country in the diplomatic UI. Ah yes, market access. This is going to be kind of the core of deciding who you can trade with and why. So market access being the next section is basically a barrier to stop you from being able to see everything that's going on in the world. And in this system, I can see the potential for holes and successes. So their idea is you don't want to be able to, if you're playing as Britain, for example, see what Germany is selling on the market, because maybe they don't want you to know that kind of information. It's not like there's a world war coming or anything. As a result, you're going to have to manually negotiate market access with nations that you want to start buying and selling from. In this, you'll basically just click on the nation, negotiate market access, and hopefully if the conditions are correct, you should be good to go. Then when you return to the international market, you should see anything they're selling there, and anything you're putting up to sell yourself, they will have access to buy. Since the dev diary is following a sort of laid out, structured path of how to do this, I'm going to not disrupt the flow too much and just carry on, and we'll talk about it after. So we've gotten some market access, so we can go back into our international market and start buying equipment. In this case, we have the option to buy things like guns and artillery from a country that appears to be Pink Peru or something. Very odd. In this example, we're going for infantry equipment, and now we have to decide how much infantry equipment we want and for how long we want to pay back the debt. So it's kind of an exchange, basically always, of the equipment you want for a civilian factory cost, which is converted from the CIC. Because myself, I haven't actually seen how this works in progress, it's kind of difficult to tell you how worth this is going to be, what the exact exchange rate is going to be like. I don't have a clue. But what we can extrapolate from what we're looking at is, you're probably going to stick in a number, let's say 10,000, and then based upon how much production it costs to make that, there's going to be some output cost of how much they think it's worth, and then you're going to have to offer up civilian factories to make up the difference of that pricing. It also shows in this little section down here that you can choose how many factories are going. So this makes me think it's going to be a kind of a pay delivery system of you choose how much you get per factories you've dedicated to match the CIC cost. I guess in some mindset you're saying if you wanted 10,000 guns, which costed, in this case, 10 factories, then you could say you'd get one shipment of 1,000 guns per factory sent over a period, or you could do all 10 factories up front and you get all of the guns in one shipment, one delivery, all in one. Again, this is just what I'm taking away from this. I could be wrong. It remains to be seen how it's actually going to work in progress. Moving on, once we've sent over our desire for equipment, the number of equipment we want, and how many factories we're dedicating to this exchange, them getting the factories, us getting the deliveries of the thing we purchased, we'll get a nice message which says purchase request accepted, text, 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 text. And finally, in the most logical step, when you look in your international market, you will now see that you're buying from the country name in specifics, the deliveries it's going to take, and when the next delivery is. So in this case, we can imagine that perhaps in their system, they afforded enough factories of, let's say there was 12 factories required. They went for 3 factories, civilian factories dedicated to it. So if they needed 3 to make up the 12, then they're getting 3 times 4, so 4 deliveries. This is a very technical dev diary, isn't it? We're talking more about numbers instead of wacky focus trees or something like that. And now onto the flip side, we see the alternative, which is going to be selling. So in this case, we're selling infantry equipment to the market, and because you don't decide how much you buy in variables, you just dedicate how much you're willing to sell, it should be simpler in this case to just say, you click on your infantry equipment and you tell them how much infantry equipment you're willing to sell to the market. And there I think it shows you how much rate of exchange you're going to get when you're selling it. It also says price normal at the bottom there, which makes me wonder, is there going to be events which fluctuate the pricing of kind of the conversion factor? There is no money in the game, nor are they adding money, so it all comes down to how they calculate the industrial capacity to CIC ratio. That's it. How much does it cost to make a gun versus how many civs are you willing to give up for it? And if there is a pricing system, maybe world events or diplomatic relations can actually change that exchange rate, and maybe you get more civs for less guns or more guns for less civs. Who knows? Once you've put the equipment on the market, there is no guarantee that anybody's going to buy the equipment. So for the time being, it's just going to sit around in your sell equipment screen as an open contract that anybody can choose to go for if they wish to. Eventually, somebody might take you up on your request. It seems we've returned with the pink Peru, and this time they want to buy those guns. And now we see the inverse of the screen in the international market, where we now see the contract is fulfilled and we are sending out the delivery to the country in question. With that, we come to a breather for technical details, which is where we can kind of think about what we just consumed. So they say that market access is a diplo action to request access to a market and to offer up your market in return, a bilateral relationship. There's no world where you can see somebody else's stuff and they can't see your stuff too. So always make sure you've considered that in your equation. In addition, faction members share market access, as do puppets and overlords. This is where I come to the first major question. New features are always good, but the usability of them is always under question. And I am confused, as it stands right now, what will happen if you start as a nation, let's say Ireland for example, and you find yourself with no allies, not really getting into any alliances. You have no puppets, you have no masters, and you don't know anybody. In that situation, are you going to have to manually start asking for market access from everybody in the world if you want to start, trading with people? In addition to that, who's to say you even know who has anything to trade? So when you start off, you don't see anything to buy because you have no market access. And what if you wanted, let's say, transport planes? Maybe there is a nation that for some reason is selling them. Let's say Argentina. How would you know that Argentina is selling transport planes if you have to ask them to see that they're selling transport planes? You wouldn't know. As a result, I'm just kind of theorizing there's going to be an awkward world where you might feel obliged to, at the very start of the game, click every single nation in the world that you have decent relations with just to get market access from them, so that you know what your options are going forward if you, for example, had some specialist equipment and you didn't know who to buy it from. Speaking to the devs, I think this is something they've kind of thought about, or at least considered, or are considering, and the two things I think I got from the conversation were there is some idea about adding in some kind of global market where you can see things that are like mega publicly available and you don't necessarily have to ask for market access. Or alternatively, I was wondering if there's going to be a system of like, is there a button you can click to say, send out like a mass market access envoy to everybody in the world, and just anybody who says yes, send it straight back? Because I really hope it's not going to be the case that, France, market access, Britain, market access, USA, market access, Canada, market access, and you just have to keep clicking them all and asking everyone. Oh, that could be annoying. Moving on, they talk about some things that can block market access. Going to war with a country, well, that sounds logical. No reason to trade with somebody you're at war with. Embargoing a nation, again, kind of comes with the name. Countries that are capitulated have no contracts to offer, also makes sense considering the nation in question isn't there to kind of trade with. Civil wars do not change anything, however, so I guess even under a great conflict, those ships are still sending out the good stuff. And finally, we see things like being a puppet, engaging with a conflict with a country, and also puppets cannot trade with other people necessarily, only to their overlords. So it's all just stuff to consider. For the final section of this dev diary, they're talking about contracts. So as we've discussed, when you're buying and selling things, you're going to have to arrange a contract between you and the other nation that a series of deliveries will be made in relation to the factories you dedicate to it. And again, they reiterate that this is going to be worked out between a CIC cost from equipment and the Civ factory allocation for payment. The contracts in question are actually stated that they're going to be every 30 days. So earlier when we were seeing that it's 4 deliveries, that's going to be 4 months of deliveries. And again, they clarify that it's going to be that the proportion of amount of civs that you dedicated to the contract is going to result in the payout of equipment you get for that contract. To ensure that things keep moving within these contracts, there's going to be a stockpile and a market stockpile. So the guns you have in your stockpile are what it was previously, how many guns you've got going in your nation, and the market stockpile is going to be separate so that if you've already agreed to a contract and things, your gun supplies are running low, maybe Operation Barbarossa is kind of hitting a slow point, then the guns that you've already guaranteed to the market stockpile are still being shipped out. Since payment is going to be handled with construction factories, civilian factories, starting a new contract is going to give you an indicator of how many factories you're dedicating, which is in the construction menu next to your consumer goods and special projects and stuff like that. On the flip side of this construction menu, we also have the person who's receiving the factories in question, or at least the output of those factories, which is considered the CIC, in a contract storage, so that the production that you're kind of getting from selling the equipment to somebody is stored separately from just getting a civ, like it would be with, let's say, if you were requesting a license and the license you give them a civ and they just straight up get a civ for them to use. With this one, you have a bank of CIC construction that you can use and apply to things that you're using in your main line production. Goodness, that was quite complicated to explain. They do have a flowchart to help us out, so hopefully this will be clearer than whatever mumbo jumbo I just said. Okay, so I think this is the flowchart in question. I think on the right, this is the basic buying deal. You want 75 rifles a month, it goes into the market stockpile, you get it. But this is to kind of show you how they're working out the cost. So if 100 rifles put on one sieve is 200 CIC, or 200 CIC for one sieve, which is how much you would get from making the equipment, and you can pay 5 CIC a day. In Hoi 4, I think there's always 30 days in a month, so 30 times 5 is a month, so that's 150 CIC a month in your, magical CIC bank that we have now. And then from that bank, which is shown here, you need to get the 100 rifles from 150 CIC, but you need 200, so that's why it's 75 over 100. So this would take 2 months to do, wouldn't it? You'd get 1 month where you'd get 75 because you can only do 150 with 5 CIC a day, and then the next month you'd get the final 25. And then for the seller, you would get your normal construction, seen here, but you'd get like money back added on from 150 CIC from selling it, which helps more towards your own construction. It says here valued at 50%. So is it that you can only get 50% like faster construction of equipment from this? I'm asking this as a rhetorical question because, well, everything is work in progress and nothing is finalized. So you won't know until later on in a proper dev diary when everything is set in stone. But yes, it does seem to be that the output that you get from your CIC bank is only 50% max over the construction of what it would have got anyway. So you can't, dump all your production instantly that you stored in a bank into building something mega quick. And for the last thing to say about contracts in our final section is their cancellation. If things don't work out, then everybody can just stop it, and everything goes back to their original owner. So things that they're not including from this are trade ships, money, and supply-demand pricing. That is to say, this all just uses the normal convoys. There's no money system, there's just the CIC bank, which is basically just storing up your production that you're making, that you would have made from things at your factories anyway, and then applying it later as a buff. And there's no supply-demand, so you can't, inflate the prices. The price is what the price is, whatever they decide the price to be when they release it. So to wrap up my final thoughts about this, the system itself, I think, is a positive one. I think having a global market that people can trade and sell things in is pretty good to have in a game that's basically about preparing for a world war, and I don't see any issue with it. I just think, as is expected from something that's work in progress, there could be some kind of annoyances to deal with, specifically with market access from different countries, if you don't know what you're doing with any of it. And I think there is a level of complication to understand, especially regarding how much you're willing to get from selling stuff for the production value you're getting back on stuff. To put it to you another way, I just wonder how much is it worth spending factories producing things that you're not going to use yourself in a war if, for example, the only thing you're getting back from it is a 50% production bonus on top of that for other things you're producing, unless the thing you're producing you need to produce a lot of very quickly, such as, like a rapidly new design tank, and you very quickly need to spend all your production on getting that thing out as quickly as possible for some new divisions. Other than that, I guess that's kind of where I'd see the CIC bank used anyway. Other than that, I would kind of just use the mills to produce things that I would need to be producing anyway. I don't know, if you're making an excess, is that not your fault? Just a thought, I suppose. Okay, now because we have to talk about last week's Dev Diary, I'll end things there and say thank you very much for watching. If you're done watching here, if you liked, feel free to subscribe. I'm going to go talk about the new MIO. Hello, you're still with us. Well then, welcome back to a previous Dev Diary, which we're going to be doing a short catch-up on to mention what military industrial organizations are. Let's begin. So, a military industrial organization, I think, to my mind at least, is going to be a rework of production designers in the game. So previously, they were 150 political power, basically buffs, modifiers that you could get if you had extra PP, so that you could make the pre-existing things you're making slightly better. Your tanks faster, your artillery hit harder, your planes more agile. Their hope, so they say, is to hopefully make it so that the way you do production designers going forward is less so that they're going to be, let's say, static at the start of the game and they don't do anything, but more so they follow a skill tree so that as you progress using them and spend time with them, you can specialize them to maybe focus on things that you specifically want them to do. So previously you'd kind of have 3 tank designers, heavy, medium and tiny. It's not called tiny, is it? It's called light. Okay, tiny tank designers. But now you'll be able to choose down which path or branch you particularly want to follow that through, and then maybe make something closer to your playstyle, whether it's involving more soft attack or armor or speed. What they did next was go through a big rundown of all the features they're hoping to get from the military industrial organizations. In the site of roleplay, there's things such as renaming them, changing their icon, changing their size or level. So I guess there's a difference between having a really small one which has some very minor buffs or a big one with more buffs. Funds such as XP. I'm guessing this would be maybe spending army XP or navy XP to maybe speed up the rate at which those production designers get upgraded. So similar to like rushing doctrines by using XP to get like a 50% boost or whatever it is. Task capacity and departments, which we'll get onto later, and then subsections describing what departments you can have, designing those departments, and the tasks that they can equally hold on to. So there's a decent chunk in here. It seems to be that their hope is to try and balance the system so that it covers both bases of what production designers were doing at the time. There were those who were kind of, let's say, innovators who were coming up with new blueprints, new design theories of ways they could make better equipment for the war. And then there were more so the production designers, the people who were thinking about how they can more efficiently produce things, maybe make tanks faster in this regard, maybe just in terms of output of producing tanks, and not necessarily the speed of tanks. And as can be expected throughout the process of a war, they're going to get better at those things and maybe find different ways of doing it. So the hope is that this system is kind of going to replicate that innovative process so that the production designer just doesn't 150 BP buff for the rest of the game, and instead 150 PP or whatever price it's going to cost, and then slowly you'll be like, right, let's focus more on this, let's focus more on this, and let's improve this. The MIOs themselves won't actually have buffs for everything, however, though, so now they're going to have kind of specific projects that you're going to have to assign them to work on, whether that's making them assign things in the research tree or actually assign things in the production line. You can't just have static buffs going forward. Moving on, we see how they're still located in the same location one might expect to find them in the research and production tab, but now you're going to see when you click on them what they're up to, what they're working on, and more details once you click further in. One of those details is going to be a skill tree, which looks remarkably similar to the doctrines, which is kind of why I brought it up earlier with the you spend XP to work down a doctrine path. I think that's kind of the basis of what they're going for here. If you imagine that the production designers are going to be like land doctrines or air doctrines, then as you move down, some of them are just going to be basic buffs, and some of them are going to be like mutually exclusive buffs. And because of that, you're going to have to decide which way you want to go. There is some specific notation to something called traits and trait points, so it's not just a standard skill tree. There is trait points, which I assume will be gathered over time as wars and situations develop. Moving on, we see a snippet of the kind of expectation you might have in terms of what they can do now. So in the research side, we see here we're trying to research, is that like the level 1 base infantry equipment damage upgrade? And here you can see you can choose between researching without MIO or with an MIO, which should give you a boost in time to produce it. On the flip side, we also see the option for them to appear in equipment variants. So when you're designing equipment, such as the new plane designer they added in the previous DLC, you now actually will see their designer can be applied inside the designer to that particular model. So any of the buffs that they have as a production designer will go directly into your variants. So making sure you assign the right designer for the right variant is going to be important. And remember, as I said earlier, they have finite amount of tasks they can do. So if you're producing, I don't know, 7 different plane variants, carrier versions, standard versions, your CAS, your strategic bombers, you can't necessarily have one plane designer have buffs for all of them. They're going to have to specialize. And production designers will find themselves in, well, the standard production lines too. So in your production lines that you see here for ships, you do have the option of a big pink plus to assign some production designers to maybe speed up the production speed of certain things being made, or maybe there's some other utility that could come from it, such as the amount of production you get in terms of like guns being produced or something. In total, that's 3 different outlooks you have. You've got the research, you've got the variant designer, and you've just got the base production lines. All 3 of these things can now be influenced by the production designer and specialized into them. So that's something to consider going forwards. But, there was some confusion apparently regarding the reaction to the MIO designers, in that some people thought you were going to have the ability to completely customize what they were, like from the ground up, like I want this buff and this buff and this buff, and then you send it out. They're saying that this was a misinterpretation of what they were doing. They're saying that the production designers are they're already built in. They've already kind of designed them. You're just going to move down their pre-designed trees, like focus trees are already made for you, and just choose which of the buffs available you want. So you won't necessarily be able to make I don't know, let's think of something silly. A Liberia, which only specializes in making tanks that have the highest possible speed. If they haven't made a tree which has that specific outlook for it for you to go down, then you can't do that. You're still pretty much limited by the production designers available. It's just that because they have kind of skills within them, you get to decide what traits you want from them. It's better, but it isn't that better. So I guess people got a little bit too carried away, and they had to clarify it by giving some examples of all the different things you could possibly get. I mean, here's an infantry one that we could briefly look at, talking about breakthrough that equipment could give you, defense, or the actual production cost in the production lines. So all of this is options that you'll have to choose between, and then you just pursue that particular path. You can't necessarily alternate and do something completely off the wall. Okay, and with that, this video is already long enough. I hope this was somewhat informative about telling you some of the ideas that are coming to i4. Everything I've said here is, again, work in progress. Who knows? I might be talking out of the derriere. I have no idea what I'm saying, but this is what they're saying, and we can extrapolate what we want and give feedback, which you can do in the comment section of the dev diary, because by the time you're seeing this, the dev diary will be out. Oh, and if you have any questions directly, you can also put them in my comment section, because I also have access to talk to the devs, so maybe I can sort of pass a question along if you did have something. With that, I'll say thank you very much for watching. If you liked, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and I guess I'll see you for future dev diaries. Bye!